invited me to be a lecturer for the Tombaugh Club meeting. And I checked the list of previous lecturers, and it's an impressive list of people and a lot of interesting subjects. I'm honored to have the opportunity to be a presenter and be added to the list of the Tombaugh Lecture Series. So I'm going to dive into the partial phase phenomena now. And these are all the things that are related to the sun being slowly covered by the moon. And some are unique to eclipses. So let's move on to one of the thermodynamic effects, the mysterious eclipse breeze. Some people don't believe in this. Some people think it's an urban legend, but I think it's real. And there's two concepts for it. One is an old concept and one is a new concept that I've kind of introduced. When you're picking a site for the eclipse, obviously your goal is about 24 to 72 hours before the eclipse to put yourself in the bubble of high pressure. You don't want to be at weather fronts. And if your bubble of high pressure has really calm conditions and there's no wind because you're not close to a weather front, you might have the ability to experience a real eclipse breeze. Now, summertime breezes on a calm day, the little light breezes you feel, are actually due to the fact that that radiant energy is being delivered to the earth, and there's rising eddies balanced with cool falling eddies. There's warm rising eddies balanced with cool falling eddies. You don't see them, but they're happening. Well, an eclipse during the partial phases shuts off that energy to the earth and shuts off the energy that creates the rising warm eddies. So therefore, the cool falling eddies stop also. So during an eclipse, theoretically, based on thermodynamics, small light breezes should stop. So an eclipse breeze happens when your observing position just happens to be in a perfect position where you're next to some hills or some mountains at the proper distance in the distance and in the direction of umbra approach, so that the cooling temperatures from the deepening penumbra cool the air in the mountains before it cools you, and that air coalesces and rolls down the mountains and hits you at your observing site. So if you're at observing site where the terrain has this, and you feel a coolish breeze coming from the direction of umbra approach, you're feeling a thermodynamically created eclipse breeze. Now, if the mountains are too far away, you won't feel it because that breeze is not going to make it to you. And if the mountains are too close, you're not going to feel it because your observing position is going to cool at the same time as the hills are cooling, and there won't be a gradient, there won't be a differential to start the flow or the motion of the cool air down the slopes to hit your observing position. My new theory of eclipse breeze that I witnessed in 2019 has to do with going back to my really accurate temperature data curve I had from that eclipse because I used the I button. There are two little bumps in this data curve that show warming for some reason. When we were at this eclipse in 2019, we were looking west at the eclipse, and me and the observers that were with us at a couple of points felt this warm breeze coming to our faces. We could just feel it coming to us. It's very gentle. And I mentioned, just as an aside, you know, guys, that could be an eclipse breeze, but I didn't really think too much about it, just kind of mentioned it in passing. But when I got home and I looked at this data, it started to make sense for me. This warm breeze that we were feeling on our face has to do with these two warm bumps in temperature. So if the partial phases are decreasing the radiant energy to the air, and we know that the ground level temperature generally decreases pretty linearly, where did these two bumps come from? Well, here's my theory. Remember, we had a tremendous decrease in our ambient ground temperature, 26 degrees. But the ground cools first because that's where the radiant energy is not getting absorbed. But there becomes a layer above you at some height, and I don't know what that is, where there's an inversion layer. There's warmer air above you because that is not being cooled yet by what's happening at the ground where you're standing. And then, of course, there's cooler air above that as you go higher into the atmosphere towards the troposphere. So my theory for the eclipse breeze that we felt in 2019 was this unstable air mass, this big inversion layer we had over the very cool air we had at the ground. And I think that cooler air was falling through the inversion layer. Cooler air from above the inversion layer was falling through the inversion layer, getting warmed slightly. And we felt it on our faces down at the level of the ground, where we were experiencing at the time probably a 20-degree decrease in Fahrenheit of temperature.